You're welcome back to Kemafrik Fashion. So I want to go ahead to make pants. If you have a basic pant block, you can easily modify it to create a boot cut, maybe a fitted jean-like trouser. You can make a palazzo from your basic pants. It all depends on what you do to the lower parts of your body, of the pant block. Okay, so I have a long stretch of paper here. If you're using a regular small paper, you can tape it at the middle just to achieve the length you need. And other things I'll be needing, I'll be using this to trace my front block on another paper so as to create the back block. And I'll be making use of a marker just for clarity purpose. I have my super long ruler here, and my curve just makes getting the curvy part of the outfit easy. I also have the hip curve for the hip mainly, and then of course my scissors. And you need a fabric on which you'll be cutting what you have drafted on the paper. So we're working with a waist circumference of 35 inches, hip circumference of 44 inches, thigh circumference of 27.5 inches, the knee circumference will be 16 inches, ankle circumference of 13 inches, and from the waist to the crotch, which is the crotch depth, 10.5 inches, waist to hip, 8.5 inches, waist to knee, 22 inches, and we have our full trouser length, 38 inches. So we'll be starting on this side of our paper. So I already created a margin at the top of my paper and at the side. So this is like 1 inch wide. It's just a guide. So I'll be taking all my measurements from here. So the first thing I'll be doing is to put in my vertical measurements. Okay, and we'll be labeling it. So just follow me as much as you can. From the top, that's the waist. This actually should represent our waist line. So from the waist, like I said, to the hip, I marked 8.5. That's for me. You need to take your own measurements and mark exactly what you have as your waist to hip. 8.5. So we'll square that out this way. So now we'll mark our crotch depth, which is 10.5. And we'll put in that line. Next, I'll mark my waist. Next, I'll mark my waist to knee, which is 22 inches. Next, the waist to ankle, which is actually the full length of our pants. 38 inches. So my reason for marking it in multiple places is just to get a straight line. So let me label this line so we don't get it mixed up. This is the hip line. This is the crouch line. And this is the knee line. And the last of these lines, that's the one at the ankle, is right here. Okay, so this is our ankle line. I can just say the hem, because that's where the hem of our pants will be located. Okay, so now we need to work on this. The first thing we'll be marking out here is our hip circumference, because we want to create a line this way. So the hip circumference divided by 4. I'm working with 44 inches, so by the time I divide it by 4, I get 11. So for this crouch depth, I've shown you how to measure it. That's from here to this line here. I've shown you how to measure it, but then you can also calculate it by dividing your hip circumference by 4, but I'm not making use of that. I just took my measurement and I'm making use of 10.5. So if I had used that other method, I would have made 11 inches, but I think that may be a little bit long. So I made use of 10.5 here. Okay, so hip circumference divided by 4. Let's mark it on the hip line and draw a straight line upward. So I'm working with, I'm taking my measurement from here this way. So we'll have 11 inches. I'll take the same 11 inches up here. Okay, so on this crotch line, we need to extend it a little bit. So you can divide your hip circumference, as in what you took here, that's hip circumference divided by 4. So divide whatever value you get by 4 again, then you extend this part. Okay, so if I'm working with 11 inches, so if I divide 11 inches by 4, that would be 2.75. okay, so I will extend this by 2.75. so another thing you can do is to just put in your thigh circumference divided by 2. So we have 2 thighs, and for each leg you divide the circumference by 2, not 4. Note that the hip circumference was divided by 4 because it crossed across the whole body, but your thigh we have 2 thigh for the 2 legs. Okay, so I will be using my thigh circumference divided by 2. So I'm making use of a thigh circumference of 27.5. If you divide 27.5 by 2, okay, that will be 13.75, and I'll just mark that out here. So even if you measure the extension here, it's still the same value you get if you had divided my hip by 4. So that's accurate. Okay, so we're going to extend this line. That way, if you had divided my hip by 4 here and added whatever you get here, so we'll have still gotten the same value. Okay, so right now we're going to curve this line and connect these 2 lines together. So you don't need a deep curve here. Just try to avoid making it deep. Like I always say, your curves are there for you to manipulate, not the other way around. So we have a smooth curve this way. So now we're going to find the midpoint of this our new line, which is 13.75. We're going to divide it into 2 and get the midpoint. So I get something close to 6.9. I just folded my tape to get that. So I'm going to mark the midpoint all the way down. I'm even going to get it up so that we can input our dart. Great. So the next thing we need to do is to mark out our dart. So it all depends on you. This pattern I'm creating also includes the band, so I'll be making my dart a little bit long so that by the time I remove the band, I still have a substantial amount. So I'm putting it at 6 inches and ½ inch width. And then we have this. So the next thing we'll be doing now, we'll take our hip waist circumference. Okay, so we're working with a waist circumference of 35 inches. By the time we divide it into 4, and that will be 8.75. So 8.75, remember we took out 1 inch for that here. I will add that to our measurement. So instead of 8.75, we'll have 9.75, and I'll be taking that from, I'll take my measurement from here. So 9.75. So we already have our hip We've already taken out our hip and our thigh, right? So the next thing we'll be doing is to divide the knee circumference by 2. When you divide it by 2, you make here the central point of whatever you get. So our knee circumference is 16 inches. By the time we divide it by 2, we have 8. Okay, so to put 8 here, we're not going to start from here or from any other place. We're going to put 4. That's 8 divided by 2. We're going to put 4 at the middle here so that our pattern can be centralized. Okay, and we'll move down to the ankle. Our ankle circumference is 13 inches, so we have 6.5, but then you're going to find the midpoint of 6.5, which is 3.25, and you place it there and mark. So you mark 6.5 here and 0 this way, so that the middle will be on this line. So now we're going to connect these dots together. So at this point, it depends on the kind of pants you're making. If you're making a fitted pants, you can make it thin. This is slightly fitted, okay? So for a basic pants block, it may just be straight so that you can modify it to whatever you want. So now I'm going to connect here this way and this way. Okay, let's start with here. Okay, let's say avoid sharp curves. They are not your friend. Their friend and again, whatever curve you're using is there to guide you. Feel free to modify it. So, and here we have this. Okay, so we are almost done. Just a quick walk on the waistline. We're going to raise this waistline a little bit, so by half an inch, and just smoothing it towards this that leg here. So this just gives your pants a better fit, that's all. Okay, erase this part. So we have this. So that's it with the front. That's it with the front. Easy, right? So the next thing we'll do before we add our allowances, I'm going to transfer this using my tracing wheel onto another paper so that we can keep that for the back. So now I'm done tracing this pattern on another paper for the back. The next thing I'll be doing is to add allowances, half an inch allowance all through the front pattern, this pattern. So just take your tape and measure half an inch. I'm a little bit short of paper here, but when I'm cutting, I know what to do. So at the hem, I'm going to add you can add 2 inches or 2.5 for the hemming allowance. So let me just mark 2.5. So I'm spreading this a little bit, and that's because this part is not straight. So if I just make this straight, you may have a shortage when you fold. So just very slightly, because this part is still not too wide. So we have this. Go further. Your pants zip can be at the side or at the back. In that case, you don't need to do any other thing to this pattern. But if you want to have a front zip, that means you need a front zipper fly. That's the part where you'll be attaching the zip. You know, the dramatic way you see a zip attached on trousers. So there are two ways you can achieve that. Either you cut a separate flap for the fly, okay, or you can just do it directly on this pattern. But the method I'll be teaching here, we are doing it directly on this pattern. So we are adding the fly. So I'm going to add 2 inches. Note that I'm not including this allowance. So I'm taking my measurement from here, 2 inches extra for the fly. So just before you get to this hip line, okay, let's do this first. Let me connect these dots together. So just before you get to, or around the hip line here, you're going to smoothen this out inward. Okay. Okay, so this is what we'll be cutting out because of the zip. So if you're noticing any difference here, that's simply because it is different. This is another paper. I had to trace out my pattern again. That's because I started cutting out my pockets on the other paper before removing the band. Okay, and so I had to just trace this out for you guys. Things we do for love. Okay, so now we need to take out a band for our trouser. If peradventure you don't want to work with a band, you can just go ahead and work on the back and you'll be fine. But then I want to put a band in this pant. Okay, so I'm going to go, I want my band to be, I think 2 inches is fair. So let's just say 2 inches or 1.5 inch. Okay, let me work with 2 inches. So I'm going to mark 2 inches here. 2 inches. So I'm just going to keep pulling 2 inches, 2 inches. But before I draw this, let me cut out the top. Now I'm holding in my darts, and that's because I won't be needing a dart on my band. And next I'll be taping in the darts just to put it in place so I can mark out my band and cut out. Now I'm just going to mark out the 2 inches for my band. The other half is curvy, so I'm going to make use of my curve. For the band, we'll be marking out the zipper fly part of this pattern, but then we're going to extend the band by 1.5 inches just so to have an overlapping center front. Though this step is not compulsory, but it just gives a better feel when your band overlaps at the center, so you can totally do away with that. Now we have marked out our band without including the sewing allowance, and now we can cut it out. First, we need to label the center front and the side, just so we don't get it mixed up when we're cutting on fabric. So I'm cutting out all the allowances, the top, at the sides, and at the center front as well. Cutting out the band also means that we have removed the allowance at the top of our pants. So we should remember to replace that when we're cutting on fabric, that extra half-inch sewing allowance. Now we need to modify that a little bit. So cutting out the band has reduced the width of the dart. So we're just going to be taking back a 1-inch dart, and we're going to extend the length just a little bit. I made use of 4.5 inches here, and then we'll redraw the dart. Now I'll go ahead to mark out my pocket. Please ignore the sewing allowance at the side for now. So I'm marking the pocket width, and I'll be making use of 1.5 inches. You can take 1 inch, you can make use of 2 inches. Some can actually be wider than that, but I'm comfortable with 1.5. Now I've taken a pocket length of 6 inches, and I'll just connect to create this pocket curve. So you can just place your hand this way just to guide you in marking out the size of your pocket. So we're going to take from the crotch line, and we're going to create a curve towards one of the dart legs. So that way we have marked out the pocket. So I'm actually not satisfied with the corners I created here, so I'm just using my curve to make something better. Next, we'll be tracing this shape out on another paper, actually a double layer of papers. I have 2 papers here because I need a pocket flap and the pocket facing. So I'm going to trace this part this part I'm crossing out, this part, including here. So, but one of it will include here, the other one will be the full pocket. Sorry, I mean one of it will be the full pocket, and the other one will cut this part out, just the way we're going to do to the main trouser. I just hope this is not confusing, but please follow me. Okay, so now I'm going to trace this on 2 papers actually, because I need the pocket flap and the pocket facing. So let's do this. Trace the top. I'm tracing without the sewing allowance. Okay, so we'll have this. I'm going to cut it out on the 2 papers. So these are 2 pocket flaps, but then we want to cut out this pocket opening on one of it. So I'm just tracing out the pocket opening on this one. So you're going to see what we'll do with this when we're cutting on fabric. Okay, so this is what we'll be using to create our pocket. You can just set that aside, and now we're going to cut this out. So before cutting out, let me just add the allowance here. So the sewing, you still need sewing allowance of 1/2 inch this way. So let's cut it out. Okay, so we have everything in place now. We'll just cut out our pattern. So remember the pattern we traced out from the front. So we traced this out from the front because we want to work on it to create our back pattern. We'll be doing a little modification. So I extended the top a little bit. That's because the back will be higher to accommodate the butt at the back. So the back pattern will be a little bit higher. So we're just going to measure. This is that line, the line we marked at the middle of our front pattern. So between this line and the edge of this line, we have 4.5. So I'm just going to mark the midpoint, which is that will be 2.25. Yes, 2.25. Okay, 2.25. So now the distance between, that's the crotch extension. Now the distance between this line and here, which is our crotch extension, you're going to measure it. And mine was 2.7, so we're going to raise this by 2.75. So we're going to raise this by 2.75. Remember our waistline, just take, mine was 8.75 and we added 1 inch for that. It was now 9.75. So from this mark here, you're going to take 9.75 towards this edge, and this will also be raised by half an inch. Remember what we did to this at the front, by half an inch here. Okay, so we want to measure from here 9.75 towards the side of our paper. So I'm going to take 9.75 and it just stops me right here. And just take your ruler and mark. Okay, so we have this. So on this side, we're going to extend the crotch by 2 inches, still because we want it to accommodate our butt. So I like to work with 2 inches here, 2 inches here. But I won't just mark this 2 inches. We're going to come down by half an inch. So I'm going to connect this using a curve onto this line. Okay, so half inch down here, I'm going to create my crotch curve for the back, so you can see the difference between the front and the back. Almost straight. Let's actually make use of straight up until then. We're going to make a smooth. This can be dicey. Don't make your curve too deep, or you can just measure 2 inches out from this angle here, just a guide kind of. So we want to connect this through this onto this. Okay, we may actually have to modify this line a little bit, but let's do it together. So we don't want something deep. Okay, follow me. So let me just, sorry. Okay, so we have this. Mine is not that smooth, but I'll just try and work on it. But you're not supposed to have anything sharp. Nothing should be sharp. Please make sure yours is smoother than this. So mine is a little bit rough, but I know you understand what I'm trying to do, right? So we have this curve here. Okay, so if you notice that the back part of most pants is usually wider than the front. Okay, now so I've added an extra 2.5 inch here as the hemming allowance. So from this stage, after creating this curve, I'm going to add half an inch here. 1 inch, 1 inch, and 1 inch down. So let's join this together. So this is our new crotch. Okay, so to the other side, including this part, I'm going to add half inch sewing allowance. So because of this extra 1 inch we put here, I'm not going to be adding any allowance here, so it doesn't become loose. But if you don't mind some extra space, you can go ahead and still add your half inch sewing allowance. But this 1 inch here is going to take care of it and still give me a little bit of room for freedom. So now I'm going to add half an inch along the top and the side. So this was where our pattern stopped. Okay, before I do this, so we just left this hanging here, but then you need to connect it back here. So back to your hip line here. Okay, so but then I'm now going to add half inch sewing allowance. So half an inch sewing allowance all the way down till we get to the hem. Okay, so we have this half inch at the top, just like we did for the front. and then 1/2 inch this way to sew in the crotch. Okay, so we have this. So now we can cut, since we're not making use of back pockets or anything like that. Oh, sorry, we are yet to put our dart. So the distance between our front dart was 4.5 inches. So you can make a straight dart like it is for the front, but you're going to measure from this line, the same 4.5 inches. So your dart has to be slanted. And we're going to mark that out when cutting on fabric, just so you don't make an error. Okay. So I'm going to make my dart 4.5 inches long. Remember, we already inputted 1 inch extra for the dart, right? And then so we also need to now put our back band on this, just like we did for the front. We're going to fold here in. Fold here in. Use a tape to hold it down. And we're going to cut out our band. So we made our band 2 inches long for the front. So we need to do the same thing for the back. So 2 inches here. 2 inches from here, not with the allowance, please. Now we're cutting when we are cutting on fabric, we will then put our allowance. So you're going to remove this allowance you're seeing right there. So now let's cut this. Let's make this. Okay. I'm going to cut out the band without the allowance. I'm just going to remove the allowance so I don't get confused. I need to indicate that this is the center back so I don't make mistake, and this is the top bottom of the band. So when I'm cutting on fabric, I'm just going to add 1/2 inch sewing allowance all through, just like we plan to do. So this dart here, I'm going to extend it a little bit, so I will make it 4 inches. So don't worry about that little. This is just going to help tighten the waist some more. So because we have cut out this allowance here, when we're cutting on fabric, we'll then add the 1/2 inch allowance at the top. So every other part of this has its allowance already. So have a band, our main piece. Now we're going to cut on fabric. Let's start with the front. So remember that the only part we need to add 1/2 inch allowance at the top, because we have added allowances to every other part of our paper. Now I've laid up my front pattern on my fabric, and if your fabric is squeezed, please make sure you give it a good press first, because you don't want any excess allowance for your pant. Okay, so I will just go ahead now and cut exactly what I have here. Like I've been saying, the only part I'll need to add allowance is actually at the top, and that's because we cut out a band from it. Notch your nail and ankle Just place notches to help you fit against the other. Okay, so I'm taking half an inch this way. I hope you can see it. Fine. So don't forget your notch. Okay. Fine, so now I'll just mark my darts so that when I'm sewing, I don't need to start measuring that position anymore. So I've notched my dart line here, and I know I'm to take half an inch to the side. So there's no need to even mark that as long as you have notched the position of the dart. So I'm just going to move in this way. Okay, I'm marking the apex of my dart. I'm going to mark it on the two sheets and the two pieces of fabric. Okay, so I'm marking the wrong side, so that way when it's time to sew, I just take in half inch this way and take my dart down. So that's it with this. Okay, another part I like to mark, it's not compulsory, is actually here. That's this crotch line. Okay, so that when it's time to sew, I know exactly where to sew. You can just fold it in and just mark it. Mark up to here. So for the rest, I know I'm to curve in half an inch this way. Okay, so I'll do the same thing on the other side, or I can just sew directly this way, so I know that's settled. We need 4 pieces of the band, 2 for each side. So let's just do this. So remember, we've not added any allowance to this. You may want to pin it down on the fabric to prevent it from moving around. I have 4 pieces folded. I'll just go ahead and add my sewing allowance of half an inch. Then I'll place my notches on the dart position just as a guide. So I'm going to leave the paper pinned on it just so I don't get confused when it's time to sew. I know exactly where my center front is, and that just makes the work easier. So we have our band here for the front. Time to cut. Okay, just like the band, we need 2 pieces of each of our pocket flap and also 2 pieces of the pocket facing. So we're just going to do this. So we need 2 of this and 2 of this. My faithful padlock is always here for stability. Oh, sorry. Remember, we'll also need to add sewing allowance to the pocket. So half an inch all around the pocket. So we are done with the front and everything pertaining to the front. I'll just lay another piece of fabric here so I can cut the back. Nice. And like we did for the front, I'll just place this on fabric and we'll cut out 4 pieces. For the back anyway, you can have this part unfold. So we need, this is the center back, okay? So you can cut 4 pieces of this, that's 2 for each side of the back if you like, but then I love to make mine just 2 pieces, so this center back part of it will be on fold. So I'm going to place it, making sure that the center part of my band is actually aligning with the folded region of this. Okay, let me move it further a little bit. Okay, so in that case I won't need 1/2 inch allowance here because it is just folded and that's it. It's already folded and we're not sewing it in. So now I'm going to add 1/2 inch at the top, bottom and the side. I'm just notching the dart position. Okay, so we have this. I actually need 2 of that, so I'll just cut another piece of it, and that will be all for the cutting. So we can go ahead and start sewing. But before then, if you're working with a light material and you want to add a lining, please go ahead and add. But I won't advise you to put lining from bottom to hem of trouser. It may just feel a little bit bulky. So what I will say is you can extend your trouser up to the lining rather up to the knee points, maximum the knee point. So you take each piece and cut lining for each piece up to the knee at most. Okay, except if you are comfortable, of course, with a full length lining. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, which will be the sewing video. Which will be the sewing video.